watching Study with Sudhir. This is your digital classroom. My name is S Sudhir. We are looking at Act 3, Scene 3 of The Tempest, and with this we will come to an end of the ISC syllabus as far as class 11 is concerned. We have already done the 4 poems and 4 stories which are part of your syllabus, and with Act 3, Scene 3, the class 11 English literature syllabus will be complete in the best possible manner. The best explanation right here on Study with Sudhir. Okay, so without wasting any time, let's get on to Act 3, Scene 3, which is an important scene. A very important scene both from the point of view of the plot of this Tempest as well as from your examination point of view. So who all are there in this particular scene? This is another part of the island, not the part of the island where Caliban and the Stefano and Trinculo are there. This is the part of the island where Alonso, Sebastian, Antonio, Gonzalo, Adrian, Francisco are assembled. Now, they have been walking for a long time, so they are obviously extremely exhausted, right? And Prospero is watching all this from a vantage point. He is able to see what is happening. So even on stage, that's how it is. They will all be there on the ground, and Prospero will be at a slightly exalted, at a higher kind of a position, even from the point of view of the stage, right? Now, Gonzalo starts speaking, and you need to understand also that the last time we saw these particular characters, there was a conspiracy because Gonzalo had seen the sword being pulled out by Sebastian and Antonio at the very last minute, and then they had started searching for Ferdinand on the island. Now Gonzalo, an old man, and he's feeling very stiff with pain, and he's not able to walk anymore, and he says that this island is almost like a maze. You know what we refer to was, there was that Akshay Kumar movie, you know, Bhool Bhulaiya, which is actually a remake of a Malayalam movie remade into Tamil starring Rajinikanth and made in Hindi with Akshay Kumar. Okay, he says this island seems like a maze and I think my knees need some rest. Okay, so my old bones ache. Here is a maze trod indeed through forthrights and meanders. By your patience I needs must rest me. By our laking means by our little lady. Forthrights means straight paths, right? By through forthrights and meanders essentially means wandering path. So he says he thinks that his knees need some rest because he is of a slightly older age. Alonso, the king of Naples, says, "O Lord, I cannot blame thee, who am myself attached with weariness to the dulling of my spirits." So Alonso says, I cannot obviously blame you, full of sadness and despair, because he feels that this search for his son is becoming a very pointless kind of an exercise, very futile exercise, and it says that it is no fault of yours, Gonzalo, that you are feeling tired, because even I am tired, and mentally and emotionally, he says, my spirits are actually very, very low. So he asks Gonzalo to sit down and rest, and he says that he will give up his hopes of finding his son Ferdinand, and he says hope cannot just be a flatterer and deceive him and keep telling him and keep feeding him the hope that Ferdinand may be alive. So what he says is that he is drowned whom thus we stray to find, and the sea mocks our frustrate search on land. Well, let him go. So he is now getting convinced after all this walking on that island that Ferdinand is indeed drowned. So he says, so the person we are searching for is actually a wasteful exercise. He says it's as if the sea is actually making fun, is poking fun. The sea mocks. It's as if the sea is making fun of us, because if Ferdinand is indeed drowned, he must be actually right below on the seabed, and therefore the sea is mocking us for undertaking this search for Ferdinand, whereas he is no longer there on the island itself. He is not there on land. So he says, let him go. So it basically shows that Alonso is getting resigned to fate, that he has indeed lost his son Ferdinand. Now, Antonio, who we saw him hatching a conspiracy to kill Alonso and Gonzalo along with Sebastian. He says in an aside to Sebastian, I am right glad that he is so out of hope. So he says that I am so glad that he is actually losing hope, and then he goes on to tell Sebastian that please do not lose sight of the conspiracy that we have hatched in order to kill him and overthrow Alonso. And he says that we must not forget the plot, and repulse is again basically saying we should defeat and it's a reminder of the fact that the last time they could not carry out whatever conspiracy they had hatched. And Sebastian agrees and says they must take advantage of the next opportunity. Then Antonio, again in an aside to Sebastian, says, let it be tonight. Let that be done right away tonight itself. And he says that they are all tired after the walking and therefore they cannot be vigilant while they are sleeping during night, and therefore that makes it the best time to attack them and kill them as compared to when they would be more fresh, right? Sebastian, I say tonight, no more. And then there is solemn and strange music and Prospero on the top, and he's invisible. And this music is being played by Ariel and other fellow spirits. Now, Alonso, when he hears this particular music, is surprised and he says, where did this music come from? Because he had not seen any of those kind of creatures who are coming there, those kind of spirits he has not seen before, right? And enter several strange shapes, bringing in a banquet and dance about it with gentle actions of salutations and inviting the king, etc. to eat, they depart. So they are able to see these kind of figures and they find these creatures extremely strange. So Sebastian, Alonso, what harmony is this? My good friends, hark, marvelous sweet music. Give us kind keepers heaven. What were these? So Alonso, very surprised. Sebastian, a living drollery. A living drollery is a puppet show of living persons. Okay, please mark this. It's a live entertainment show. So Sebastian calls it a live puppet show and he says he's not worried, and he makes a reference to unicorn and phoenix. Now, what are unicorn and phoenix? Now, unicorn is a mythical animal typically represented as a horse with a single straight horn projecting from its forehead. Okay, so you need to know the definition of a unicorn. What is a phoenix? Now, phoenix is a thing which is used a lot about anyone who makes a comeback in that sense, and it was most famously used in India's context by former Prime Minister H.D. Deve Gowda in the year 1997 in the Lok Sabha. He said, I will rise like a phoenix from the ashes, which hasn't happened now for over 2 decades. Now, phoenix in classical mythology is a unique bird that lived for 5 to 6 centuries in the Arabian desert. After this time, burning itself on a funeral pyre and rising from the ashes. So it burns itself in the funeral pyre and rises from the ashes with renewed youth to live another cycle, right? So it is considered to be a unique and a mythical bird as far as classical mythology is concerned. Now, so he makes a reference to both unicorns as well as to phoenix out here, saying that, you know, it's a living puppet show, and now I will believe that there are unicorns, that there in Arabia there is one tree, the throne of the phoenix bird, and there is one phoenix which is actually ruling out there, right? Basically saying that travelers who have reported about having seen unicorn and phoenix were actually disbelieved and ridiculed, where they would come back to the land and say, we saw a unicorn there, we saw a phoenix there. They would not be believed and they would be made fun of. But he says that now that I have seen these creatures out here in this remote island, I am ready to believe that even unicorn and phoenix do actually exist. And if we go and tell others about what we have seen on this island, the other people back in Naples will also call us liars. Antonio says, I am willing to believe everything, and says that travelers do not lie, but fools who are back home do not believe them and end up condemning them. Gonzalo says, if I go to Naples and report this, will people believe me? He raises the question, you know, in contrast to what Sebastian and Antonio are saying. Gonzalo says that if I go back home to Naples and report what I am seeing along with all of you, will people believe me? And he says, I am certain that these are inhabitants of this particular island, and though they look like monsters, this is important, though they look of a monstrous shape, he says, though they look like monsters, their behavior and temperament is more gentle than that of human beings. Again, an important point showing the difference between good and bad, black and white, right? So that's what he says out here. Certus essentially means certainly. Prospero, now he is speaking in an aside. Now he cannot be seen by all these characters. He says in an aside, honest Lord, thou hast said well, for some of you there present are worse than devils. Important line again from an examination point of view. He says there are some of you there who are actually worse than devils. And who is he referring to? He is referring to his brother Antonio, who overthrew him from the dukedom of Milan. He is referring to Sebastian. He is referring to Alonso, who helped Antonio overthrow Prospero and banish them from the kingdom, so from the dukedom. So Prospero is making a reference that there are some of you there who are actually worse than devils, and obviously is not including Gonzalo, because Gonzalo was the one who had actually helped him 12 years ago. And Prospero is also amused at what is really happening at that point in time. Alonso says these creatures are actually trying to express through their gestures even though they cannot speak, and that's what is the reference to excellent dumb discourse. So he is saying that they are trying to express even though they cannot speak, and Prospero obviously is very amused, and he says praise in departing. So he says praise only when you depart from here, not now, after you finish the feast, after you finish eating, right? And suddenly Francisco says they vanish strangely, that is all the creatures. Sebastian, no matters, they have left their wines behind, wines as in the reference to the food, for we have stomachs, will it please you taste of what is here? So Sebastian says it does not matter that they have disappeared, because they have left the food behind and we have stomachs to feed, we have our stomachs to feed. And he asks Alonso, his brother, whether he would eat, and Alonso says, no, I will not, not I. Gonzalo, now Gonzalo speaks to Alonso, says he need not be apprehensive, because when we were young, would we have also believed that there were mountaineers who had flesh descending like a bull has a flesh which kind of descends from the neck, from the throat area, right? Would we have believed mountaineers who would come back and tell us about those kind of bulls? Or would we believe that there were such men whose heads were there in their breasts? Or now we find that these stories will be believed to be true if every traveler, I mean in terms of odds, 5 to 1 happens, and whatever they say will actually be believed. So he is actually talking about the fact that there were mountaineers who would talk about dew like bulls, that is the flesh hanging from the neck or the throat area, and there were similar men whose heads were there in their chest. Now we find that one traveler out of 5 will bring us news about them, that is the odds are there that such stories will be told. Alonso now changes his mind. He is persuaded. He says, I will eat, though I fear it will be my last supper. I fear my happiest days are over. So he is in a very melancholy and a very sad frame of mind, and he tells Antonio and Sebastian to start eating. Okay, so as soon as they start eating, there is thunder and lightning, and Ariel enters as a harpy. Now what is a harpy? I am putting the figure which is there in this Oxford University book, which kind of describes what is a harpy. Now harpy in Greek mythology is a rapacious monster, right? A very dangerous looking monster, described as having a woman's head and body and a bird's wings and claws, or it's basically depicted as a bird of prey with a woman's face. Okay, so that is how a harpy looks like. And Ariel comes and the entire banquet, that is the entire food arrangement, vanishes from there. And Ariel, and this speech of Ariel is important, the entire speech, and can come in the examination as a question. He says, you 3 are sinners, and please take notes as I am speaking. You 3 are sinners, and he basically is very sharp and blunt with what he speaks. He says that is why the fate which has actually control over this world and its agents. And who are the agents of fate? The agents of fate are the sea, the mountains, the winds that he is referring to in this piece of dialogue. The never surfeited sea hath caused to belch you up you, and on this island where man doth not inhabit, you amongst men, being most unfit to live, I have made you man, and even with such like valor men hang and drown their proper selves, right? So in this piece of dialogue, which is very important from the examination point of view, Ariel comes and delivers a long monologue, okay, and he's basically delivering a very strongly worded sermon to the three sinners, Alonso, Antonio and Sebastian, and he says, you three are sinners, and that is why fate, which has control over its world, over this world through its agents. And what are the agents? The sea, the mountain, the wind, and that's what is referred to in this piece of dialogue. And they all work according to the wishes of fate. And the sea, because of the tempest, has thrown you on this island where no man lives, because you are unfit to live among human beings. So a very strong word being said, words being mentioned by Ariel, being you amongst men, being most unfit to live. And he says, I have made you crazy, and in this state of madness, in this state of insanity, many men actually go ahead and hang themselves. Valor men hang and drown their proper selves. Ariel, he goes on to call them fools, you fools, because these three people immediately draw their swords. We are all agents of fate, that fate is the one which has employed us, and you might think of cutting the invisible wind with your sword. Again, that is something impossible, right? Which is why he's calling them a fool. You may think of cutting the water with your swords. Again, something impossible, but you won't be able to inflict any kind of harm. And he says, you cannot even remove one feather from my wing. Even if you had the power to do so, you cannot lift your swords anymore, because they have become so heavy that you do not have the strength to wield them. So that's what he says to the three of them, and of course the others can also hear. He says, Prospero was overthrown along with his innocent daughter Miranda 12 years ago and thrown into the sea, and the sea is the one which has taken revenge for the crime that you committed 12 years ago, and therefore you have been brought to this island as a punishment. And that the divine powers have not forgotten your treachery, and powers have stirred, and all creatures have become hostile to you. So the powers delaying, not forgetting, have incensed the sea and shores, you all the creatures, against your peace. Thee of thy son Alonso they have bereft, and do pronounce by me lingering perdition, worse than any death can be at once, shall step by step attend you and your ways. So here in these lines he tells Alonso that you have lost your son Ferdinand, and a prolonged misery awaits you which will be worse than death. Perdition here refers to suffering, lingering suffering and punishment, that is punishment which kind of lingers and continues for a long period of time. And he says, if you want to save yourself from all the misery, you need to repent, you need to regret sincerely for the offense, and try to now lead a pure life which will be completely devoid, which will be completely bereft of any kind of wrongdoing, any kind of sin. Prospero feeling extremely happy with what Ariel has said, right? Ariel has vanished in thunder. So basically they could see a lot of thunder and lightning, and Ariel, who came as a harpy, has vanished, right? Prospero is feeling very happy and he praises Ariel. He says, you have played the role of harpy very well. You have not left out any of the instructions that asked you to give, and the other spirits also played their part very well. My enemies now I can see are in a state of utter confusion, and they are in my power, and I will leave them in my state so that I can now go and visit young Ferdinand, who I believe is with his beloved, who also happens to be my beloved daughter, mine loved darling. And Prospero also exits. Gonzalo, in the name of something holy, sir, why stand you in this strange stare? So Shakespeare on stage is trying to create an effect that they are all affected by Prospero's very big and sharp words out there. Alonso, it is clear, he says, it is monstrous, oh monstrous, me thought the billow spoke and told me of it. So it is very clear that all this has had an effect on Alonso, and just as Prospero said, he is also very confused, he is also very terrified, and he is also looking very, very powerless. And it seems, he says, as if the billows, that is, as if the waves uttered the name of Prospero, right? So all this is having an effect on Alonso. So he says, so did the wind, so did the clouds. So he is thinking there is some connection with what happened 12 years ago, and it would seem that's essentially Alonso's guilty conscience, because Ariel in his speech has made it very clear that all of them are actually sinners. So he is reminded of the sin he committed against the Duke of Milan, that is Prospero. So he is suffering from a guilty conscience. So he realizes his mistake, and he believes that it is for that his son is actually down there, drowned in the seabed, and he says that I will also go and die by suicide and also drown myself in the sea. Sebastian, but one fiend at a time, I will fight their legends over. So Alonso exits, but Sebastian says, let the evil enemies, fiends, come one by one and I will deal with them. So he is a man of action. So he says, I will deal with each one of them. Now, Gonzalo says, then he and Antonio also exit, because Antonio says, I will follow you. Gonzalo has the last word in this particular scene. He says, all the three sinners are being driven to madness. All the three sinners are being driven to madness because of the crime that they committed has affected both their minds as well as their souls, right? Thereof suppler joints follow them swiftly and hinder them from what this ecstasy may now provoke them to do. But he's also worried about them. So he tells the others in the scene, that is Adrian and Francisco, who are a little more agile than these people. He says, go after them, because in this frustrated state of mind, they could do something extreme, they could do something drastic. Already Alonso has made it very, very clear that he wants to go and die by suicide, he wants to drown himself. So that is as far as this particular suppler means more nimble kind of legs. So this is as far as this particular scene is concerned, and with this we come to the end of Act 3. We have completed Act 1, Act 2 and Act 3. We will do the basic themes of the different acts done so far separately when we deal with question and answers, when we deal with character analysis. A lot of you have been asking me how to write questions of the Tempest. So let me just finish Act 4 and 5 also, and then we will deal with how exactly you should deal with different questions which come from the Tempest, how you should prepare for each one of them. That's again something which will take a lot of time and a lot of preparation also, both on your part as well as mine. So that's as far as Act 3 is concerned. We will do Act 4 and Act 5, and with that the Tempest for class 12 ISC English Literature will also get completed. Thank you very much for watching.